Before we dive into today's episode, I want to share something with you that I genuinely believe in. If you are facing divorce and feeling overwhelmed, and I know you probably are, I want you to know that there is a better way to navigate this process. And that is why I am proud to partner with Hello Divorce, founded by my friend and CEO, Erin Levine. Hello Divorce offers a structured, step-by-step approach that helps you move forward with clarity instead of chaos. You get transparent guidance, access to legal support, mediation options, financial resources, and tools designed to reduce conflict and save both time and money. It is built to help you make smart decisions from strategy, not fear. If you want a more thoughtful and efficient path forward, visit hellodivorce.com/Susan to learn more. Welcome to Divorce and Beyond, a podcast about navigating divorce and what comes next. I'm Susan Guthrie. I'm a divorce attorney and mediator, and for more than 3 decades, I've helped people navigate divorce with clarity, strategy, and compassion. Each episode offers practical insight into the legal, emotional, and life decisions that shape your future. So let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. So what happens to your children when parents divorce later in life? It's a question that doesn't get asked nearly enough when we talk about gray divorce. The divorce rate for couples over 50 has more than doubled in recent decades, and as more long-term marriages end later in life, families are navigating a transition many never expected. But while most conversations focus on the couple, there is another group deeply affected by this shift: adult children. In fact, when I was recently on the Oprah podcast discussing gray divorce, one theme kept coming up again and again, and that was the impact on adult children. One of the most powerful moments in that episode featured gray divorce coach Mary Jane Sweet and her adult daughter sharing their experience navigating that transition together. If you want to know more about that, listen to Mary Jane's recent episode on Divorce and Beyond. It's a reminder that even when children are grown, divorce doesn't just reshape a marriage, it reshapes the entire family. My guest today, Dr. Carol Hughes, has been studying this issue for years. She is the co-author of the groundbreaking book, Home Will Never Be the Same Again, which explores the experience of adult children of gray divorce. Carol first joined me back in 2021 to talk about this important topic, and today she's back to share what we've learned since then and what families need to understand as gray divorce continues to rise. This is an insightful and important conversation for anyone navigating divorce later in life or supporting someone who is. So let's dive in. Well, Carol, I am so delighted that you are back with us. I could not believe when I looked back to see when your last episode was. It was 5 years ago. I can't believe it, but so happy that you are here to come back and we're going to sort of update people on gray divorce and its effect on the adult children. So thank you again so much for coming today.
Oh, thank you for having me again. There's been so much happening the last 5 years.
There really has. That's why I was a little shocked when I honestly thought it was about 2 years ago that you and I had this conversation. But 5 years, boy, a lot has happened. And I have to tell you, especially since at the end of last year, I did that Oprah episode about gray divorce. And I have to tell you, since then, My DMs, my emails, and all of the episodes that I've done since then that are focused on gray divorce have just exploded because this really is, I think, probably the hottest topic in divorce right now. But one of the things that came out of that Oprah podcast that I think is right up your alley, being the author of Home
Mhm.
Will Never Be the Same, and being someone so dialed in, is the fact that so many of the guests who shared their experience on that show were sharing the effect of their parents' gray divorce on them as adults. One of the things I think we're hearing now as gray divorce goes up, so is awareness of the effect on their adult children. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about since 2021. I know that you are getting a lot of feedback from people. You've also done quite a bit of writing on the topic. Why, at a high level, let's start with the broad sort of spectrum here, or broad focus. Why is gray divorce so disruptive for adult children?
Well, what the adult children say is, and that's anecdotally and in the little bit of research that there is that one of the questions they ask questions and then they say things like, "Why now?" After 30 years of marriage, 40 years, 50 years, whatever it is of marriage. So they were under the illusion that this would be their family forever. Their forever family, as the saying goes. And they if they had children, they were going to have the children, grandchildren, maybe even great grandchildren, maybe even be in the, at least visit the family home where they grew up. And there are all these memories. And what we know in neuroscience research is that our identity is formed by our relationships and our experiences. So they have all these decades of some, adult children are 21. Okay, that's not, or 18 even. So they're not that long. But the older adult children, 30s, 40s, 50s, it's like, this has been my life. And then it's like my family was my rock, even if it wasn't the healthiest family, it was still what they're used to. Then it's more of a shock because of the longevity that they've been in the family of origin.
It's so important what you said because what I'm hearing is they struggle in the moment with sort of a loss of family identity, which makes so much sense as you explain that. But it's not just the family identity of the past and their childhood and their growing up years, but as you describe it, it's also the family identity that people perceived as going forward. You mentioned, taking their children back to the family home where they grew up and having their parents now be the united front as grandparents as opposed to grandparents in two homes. It's both a past loss and a future loss for these adult children.
Absolutely. Past, current, and future. Yes, right. And a lot of adult children say, I'm not going to minimize that minor children are having trouble with their parents' divorce. And frankly, I think that I, as an adult child, adult children say, am suffering more because there are more losses, and I've got all of this past and what I thought was going to be my future. And people just don't understand. They have a loss from people not understanding how it's affecting them. So many losses for the adult children and the shock, as we mentioned a minute ago.
Right. You've had 30, 40 years, as you mentioned, with your parents together. And suddenly, or even not suddenly, if it's been a relationship that's had struggles, but still something about the longevity of the relationship and its place in your personal history as an adult child, it has to feel sudden and shocking no
Mm,
matter what when it comes about because of that change. I know something that we talked about in our prior episode that I've seen play out both in the cases I handled as a divorce attorney, mediator, but cases of gray divorce where there were adult children. Very often, parents who are going through gray divorce with adult children, they can put their adult kids into sort of a loyalty conflict
mm.
situation, I think, as well. And you mentioned that. I'm wondering, first, if you could explain what I mean by, well, if you could explain what's meant by that loyalty conflict, not what I mean by that, but and also just, what you've heard about that situation since then, maybe.
Yes, it is very common. Minor children have the loyalty conflict sometimes too. It's not uncommon at all. However, it's exacerbated by the parents, often of gray divorce, because they look at their adult children as adults, which they are, of course, and more as a peer. And
Yeah.
so there's more denial around it. Denial meaning unawareness. I don't mean, "Oh, I know it and I'm just gonna pretend like I don't know." There's unawareness of how it affects the adult children if the parents are relying on them like as their counselor, as their dating friend. Lots of stories about that
Oh,
one, which is, yeah,
yeah.
I haven't dated in 20, 30, 40 years. How about we double date? And the adult
Ah!
children are going, "Ooh," you know? And so all this role reversal starts happening too sometimes. And legitimately, sometimes the parents are older, they might be infirm, they're depressed, they have anxiety, they can't work. It's really a crisis for some of these older parents or even younger gray divorced parents. And so natural to rely on your children. I was there when you were growing up, you can be for me there now. And then the same thing that happens with minor children, some of the parents try to align the adult child with them against the other parent. A lot of adult children really resist that, and they have more awareness than the minor children do how inappropriate that is. And then they're really angry, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're in an emotional bind too, and it's like, well, I can't abandon my dad or my mom. But that's what the loyalty conflict is, that when parents knowingly and unknowingly try to pull their child into alignment with them against the other parent. Love me more, keep a secret from the other parent, don't tell them I'm doing this, so. That.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true in the way that you say that. The dating buddy idea is just, yeah. I'm not sure the appropriateness, right? Of now we talk about parentifying young children,
Mhm.
but I don't think here people might think of that situation because this is an adult child, so
Right,
they very well may be parents of their own children, but that doesn't make it appropriate for you to put them in that role with you as their parent.
right, right.
One of the other guests on that Oprah show who I thought he was so impactful, he was an adult son of a single mom, or not now soon to be single mom in gray divorce. And he was moving cross country, taking a brand new job that was closer to her, and she was moving in with him so that he could help her through the transition from her long-term marriage into, getting back on her feet. And he was talking on the show about he was upending his entire life as an adult of 30 something to come back and take care of his mom. And he very clearly said, I don't resent this. I want to do this. My mother has been here for me my whole life. But then he went on to say, but we've got boundaries around this. We've
Yeah.
had talks about this, and
Mhm.
it has a time limit on it. And I'm wondering how important that is as, adult children maybe want to support those parents, but also do it in a way that is supportive of them and their lives as well.
Very important. I like that. Yeah, that was very insightful on his part, whether he figured that out on his own or had a mental
I
health
think there
person.
might have been a little therapy
Yeah,
involved.
maybe. Yeah, very important, those boundaries, very, very important. And another not so obvious boundary to most people is that a lot of adult children say that what comes from their parents' great divorce is then they start questioning their ability to maintain a long-term relationship. They may
Okay.
already be married with children, they may be still dating significant others, and it just speaks to how powerfully the relationships we're in and our family affect our view of ourselves, our identity. And that's another very difficult issue for a lot of adult children is why should I trust now that I'm going to be any different at 30, 40, 50, 60 years old? It's really a huge issue in terms of almost like an identity crisis for a lot of adult children. I guess that would be the right term, actually.
Yeah, no, and it makes so much sense. Recently I had Dr. Debbie Silber on the show again, and Dr. Debbie's area of expertise is healing from betrayal
Mhm.
and how many people have struggled with that. And part of the reason is when you are betrayed by someone you care about, you lose trust in your own ability to make decisions, see what's real, believe in things. And this feels complementary to that, right? You have an adult who's grown up believing in the parents' relationship, believing that they learned, because don't our children learn how to connect with others through seeing
Yeah,
how we connect with each other? And so that makes so much sense that you say that, yet I don't know that any parent going through gray divorce thinks that in the moment.
right. It is certainly not common knowledge out there, I would say. So, and when something isn't in the public awareness and we're experiencing it though ourselves, it makes it that much more difficult too because we don't feel we have the support. And here's another example for adult children. They don't have the support in the common consciousness of what they're going through. And that's a really good example with the betrayal that you just shared. Yeah.
Yeah, the two sort of feel like, two sides of a mirror there, and as you're saying that, I always say on the show, awareness is the beginning of everything, and so I'm hoping maybe right now you and I just, you shared something here that anyone out there who's listening, whose parents are going through or have gone through a great divorce and they're struggling in this particular area, hear from you that this is a very real effect that it can have on them, because only when you know can you start to heal from these divides. When you're sort of existing without knowing, I think
Right.
it makes it just really hard. The other thing that sort of jumps out at me is one of the guests, again going back to that Oprah show, but there was so much meat there. One of the guests who was absolutely lovely, Mary Jane Sweet, who was actually recently on Divorce and Beyond. She's a great divorce coach as well, but she's been through her own divorce, and she was on the Oprah podcast with her adult daughter. And I honestly thought they were the emotional center of the entire show. Her daughter was in her early 20s, and Mary Jane talking about getting through gray divorce and the shock that it was for her and the loss of identity as someone who'd been married for so long, said that in the early days, it was hard for her to get out of bed some days. But knowing that her daughters were watching how she navigated this journey is what got her out of bed and made her every day want to give them an example of strength, courage, healing, and all of that. And her daughter, it brought tears to my eyes on the stage as I was sitting there when her daughter said, she just admired her mom each and every day. So I also, for the parents who are going through divorce right now, a gray divorce with adult children, there's probably a really valuable lesson for them as well, knowing that their adult children are watching how they navigate this time and knowing that their adult children may struggle with their relationships going forward. Do you think?
Yes, definitely. And we're not saying that parents should be like Superman, Superwoman when they're going through great divorce and that what they're experiencing isn't really valid also. It's just to be aware. You said awareness that starts everything. That's very true. It's to be aware that the parents have developmental stages they're going through, and so do their adult children. And so to be aware, just as you were saying, she's still a mother, as a role model to her daughters, and she was aware of that. So she was aware that they were watching her and in the developmental stage, their own developmental stage of what does a woman at her age who has this awful thing happen in her life, awful experience, how does she handle it? And that was very insightful, on her part.
Yeah, it was very powerful as she shared it, because I think your insights are so spot on. to what Mary Jane shared was that it's not that she sugarcoated the journey for her daughters. They knew that some days it was hard for her to get out of bed, but knew that she did. And what she, I think, very powerfully she shared with them was what she did to help her get out of bed that day. Even if it was sharing that I wanted to be there for you girls. I think that that very simple statement was very powerful for her daughters. I do want to say she also, in that, to what we were talking about earlier, was very cautious about not oversharing about the personal situation between
Mm,
she and their father and not involving the girls in that part of this. This was really a sharing of her journey and her experience without oversharing into that space. And we talk about that so often with younger children. We leave them out of the adult stuff, but you've already mentioned people sort of drop the adult line when the children are adult, forgetting that I don't care if they're 60 years old and you're, 80. They're still your children, right?
exactly. That's another example of boundary issues. Is like that it is disrespectful of parents, and I'm not minimizing again the pain that very divorced parents are going through, and they are still always the parent, and they it would be best for their adult children if they were respectful of their adult children's boundaries, as the young man on the Oprah show was talking about. And he's in a developmental stage of a new job and all of that. It's important. All of us have developmental stages at every age of life. So it doesn't happen, just disappear when we, are getting older.
As we take a quick promo break here, I want to first mention that, as always, this episode has a companion blog article. In this week's article, I break down some of the key insights we're talking about today with gray divorce and the impact on adult children. If you'd like to explore the topic further or want to share it with someone who might need it, you can read it on the blog page of the Divorce and Beyond website at divorceandbeyondpod.com. And be sure to stick around for the second half of this episode, because coming up, Carol is going to be sharing one of the most important things parents often misunderstand about how their adult children experience gray divorce and what families can do to protect those relationships moving forward. All right, so let's hear the promo and then we'll get back to the conversation. You all know I love to treat myself, and my go-to jewelry brand is Yumi. It's timeless, elegant, and the perfect reminder that you deserve something beautiful, especially for your beyond. So I'm excited to say my listeners get an exclusive discount at divorcebeyond.com/Yumiyu, that's YUMIYU, by using the code BEYOND at checkout. In Mary Jane's case with her daughters, I think they would say that the experience brought them even closer. I think they had a very close relationship beforehand, but it has brought them even closer. But flip side of that, gray divorce, we hear. In fact, I think Oprah did some episode on this after she did the gray divorce episode about estrangement that can happen with adult children and their parents having gone through gray divorce. I'd love to hear from you what you've seen, sort of this flip side of it being a positive end result of bringing people together where it actually drives them apart.
Thanks for bringing that up, because that is absolutely out there at the other side of that. And one of the main causes of that estrangement between gray divorced parent and adult children is that the adult children repeatedly report in the research, they do not listen to me. They do not understand. Again, fair enough. The parents are in pain. We're not denying that at all, minimizing it. And their adult children are in pain too. And so a lot of what I know a lot of therapists work on with adult children and the estrangement with with the parents is better communication skills. Because the days of because I said so, I'm the parent are long gone in our culture and pretty much any
I
place.
heard that in my childhood.
Yes, yes. It does not work anymore, and frankly, that's a good thing because the children are to be seen and not heard is long gone as well. It's important that we hear each other in any relationship, friends or whomever, and employers and employees. So that is one of the biggest causes for estrangement. And there was a recent research, and I can't remember now who did it. It was shocking. I recently wrote about it that it was just mothers and daughters they had studied. I think, yeah, mothers and daughters. I'm pretty sure it was daughters, but it was just mothers. Fathers were not involved of gray divorce. And the mothers attributed the estrangement to that the adult daughters just did not listen or they had mental health issues, meaning the daughters. And then the daughters said, no, mainly it's my mother does not listen to me. I cannot get through. My feelings are important too, or, what I'm expecting of our relationship, whatever. And I thought that was quite significant research. And that the daughters did not attribute it to mental health issues for the mothers. So
Right.
to me, that speaks of a little bit of in this case, matriarchal view. I'm the parent. I know better than you do. And you just don't see that, you have mental health, whatever that wasn't talked about, but I surmise that might have been part of it as well.
Wow, there's so much there that probably is if inferential rather than
Yes.
empirical. But I'm thinking of it from that perspective when young children whose parents are going through divorce talk about their feelings. Parents tend to bend over backwards to try and
Yeah.
listen. Right?
Yes.
They spend a great deal of time trying to give that safe space, or at least many of the parents I've worked with over the years in divorce and mediation. Yet what I'm hearing here is when they're speaking with or hearing from their adult children, at least daughters in this
Mhm.
particular case, although I've heard from adult sons as well,
Yes.
something similar, because the children are adults, the parents turn off that listening ear. They turn
Yeah.
off the your feelings matter. And yes, the parents' feelings matter too. They do in a divorce that's not a gray divorce and the children are young. Feelings always matter, but there's something about the children being older and adult that for the parents, it seems to shut off that, I'm still the parent. You should do what I say, but it doesn't mean I have to listen to you. It's a little like double faced there on the parents' part.
Another part of the estrangement that's very sad, and a lot of research on this with adult children of gray divorce, is that the fathers tend to lose the relationships with their adult children more than the mothers do. So that's a positive side of the mothers hanging in there. Partly that's because we guess, researchers guess, is because in the most Western cultures, women are the kinship keepers, not just in Western, I shouldn't say that, it's pretty much all over the world,
Yeah.
the kinship keepers, and often the adult children do stay connected more with the mothers than the fathers, partly for that reason, and also there's research that the mothers tend to help their adult children financially more than the fathers do after gray divorce. Just different, different, gender issues probably, but it's very sad to know that so many of the fathers of gray divorce have lost contact with their adult children. Hence, and going there will be grandchildren if there are grandchildren,
Right.
etcetera.
Yeah, that's a ripple effect, right? It's a generational impact and probably something that the adults going through the gray divorce aren't considering at that time. But perhaps one very strong thread through that is moms do tend to be that the kinship carers, the taker carers of, as you said, when you split the parental bond, then they're just continuing the kinship on the mother's side and father's. Yes, that makes perfect sense. Again, awareness I think is important. But let's look to, what you now, with your all your initial research for the book, now you've had 5 years of there's been more research, but there's also been anecdotal. I can imagine everyone in the world reaches out to you when there's any topic that has anything to do with adult children and gray divorce. What would you tell let's take it from 2 viewpoints. If you're talking right now to the parents who are going through a gray divorce who have adult children, what insights would you share with them to lighten the load on their adult children and to protect their relationships with their adult children?
That's a very good question. I'm thinking of title of a book that Dr. Constance Ahrens wrote years ago, We're Still Family. And I think if from the not all adult children have this perspective, of course, but in general, family is family. Dr. Bowlby, who's a psychiatrist in England years ago, who developed the theory of attachment, was fond of saying, we're connected from the cradle to the grave with our family, and we're attached to our family members." And so I think that would be an overarching view that I would like adult parent obviously they're adults, parents of gray divorce to have, is that what can I do? I'm in pain. I've got my own issues I'm dealing with, etc. As this parent of gray divorce, and what could I do? What can I get help with to help me be able to nurture our family, even though we're a family apart? It's the title of another book someone wrote. I don't remember. Uh, that family is forever. There are all these little nice little sayings that you see on posters and things. Family is forever. That's it, unless we get divorced, of course. But it doesn't have to be that way. And that would be the biggest gift that I think parents of gray divorce can give their adult children and grandchildren, if there are, and even great grandchildren, and extended family members, is get help if you can't do it on your own. Mental health, professional help, therapists, etc., to help you see that bigger picture and to nurture the family bonds. You don't have to be best friends with the person you're divorcing, but can you be amicable? Can there still be a sense of family, a reorganized family, we call it? You don't have to be together for every holiday, etc.
And that's similar what we might say to parents with younger children. You're still
Yeah.
a family, but as we've talked about throughout this episode, right? People somewhat tend to lose their perception when
Yes.
their children are adults. I wonder also if we should caution the parents going through gray divorce that when their adult children share their emotions and their feelings about the divorce with them, not to minimize those, right? It
Yeah.
sounds like many, as you said, many of them feel like they just can't get through to their parents about how the adult children, feel.
Exactly. I was going to come to the feelings. I'm glad you did that, Susan. For example, I'll give some very poignant ones. 25, 24-year-old is graduating from college, master's degree, and one or both parents are still so angry at each other. They're like, if your mom's going, I'm not going. If your dad's going, I'm not going. Or your mom, dad, whatever the marriage may be. And that's a celebration about that young person who has spent all these years training to be something in college, a lot of hard studying, but the parents make it be about them. And so they're not able to hear their adult children's feelings and honor what's important and celebrate with their child, their adult child. That would be a good example. And there are lots and lots. I could give more and more and more examples of that. Those are some of the most poignant ones. Or they're having a baby, then
Yes.
the young people, and I'm not going to be there. No, I'm not doing it. Or if I can't bring my new significant other, who's not a part of this family, they're not married, even if they were married, but and that no, I want it to be just our family of origin, and the parents can't hear that. So there are many examples like that.
And that, as we were just talking about, is what when the adult children don't feel heard, that's what leads to the estrangement. And I can see this, right? I don't want it to sound like it's not understandable. I've done the episodes and we've talked in many episodes and heard from many people about just how devastating a gray divorce can be for those who go through it. We talked about loss of identity for the adult
Mhm.
children. The loss of identity for people who have been married to someone else for 30, 40 years and spent their entire adulthood in a relationship is and then find themselves uncoupled is truly devastating for many people. But by not hearing their children, adults or not hearing what they have to say, they're really putting themselves in a position all the way back to what we talked about earlier, that it not only affects your past and perhaps your present. This is going to how you manage this and your adult children's feelings and communication with them about what's happening will in a very real way affect your future. The grandchild, the graduations. How many times have you had those conversations with people going through divorce and talking to them about their parenting plan? How many times have I had that conversation? But that doesn't stop. It only becomes even bigger issue when your children are adults.
Yes.
You have to hear them.
Right. In fact, there's neuroscience research to support what you just said. They can do so much now with neuroscience without having to dissect a brain after someone's passed, which isn't very helpful either. uh, but that when people they've done research with children, teens, and adults, when people feel understood, the pleasure centers, the positive emotion centers in the brain light up, so to speak, in the research. And the opposite happens when we're not understood. So it is literally painful, not just emotionally painful, but probably even throughout our body. We know that heartache is a term, and that word's been around, that phrase for millennia. And
Yes.
so if we don't believe anything else, don't believe the therapist, believe the neuroscientists who can say now that we have, specific research that supports being loved, being understood is the closest thing to feeling love that humans can experience.
That's so profound and so, deeply important for people who are listening here, no matter where they are in the spectrum of divorce, to hear that. Because maybe one of the things that stands out here is that that pleasure center that you were just talking about and the lack of pleasure one feels in not being understood, when you are talking about that effect in younger children who have to live with you because they don't have any other choice because they're, minors, et cetera, that's one thing. But your adult children have a choice about whether to continue relationships with their parents as they go forward. And that may be why there's this growing awareness of estrangement from parents, because when the adult children, they have that ability to make that choice. They can cut a parent off. They talk about that quite a bit. So the fact that there's neuroscience behind it, it makes so much sense. And it's actually unnecessary based on everything that you're saying here. If both sides of this paradigm understand that they need to be able to communicate,
Right,
the
right.
adult children need to be able to speak, and the parents need to be able to hear.
Because we're emphasizing the effect on the adult children today, in our podcast here, your podcast. It isn't that parents don't need to be understood either. That's for a
Right.
different time.
Yes.
But if I had a dime for every, I've heard this so many times from adult children. When I'm trying to talk to my mom or my dad in their divorce, gray divorce, I feel like my head's going to explode. And what we know in the mind body world, mind body connection is our body does speak. For someone to say, and I don't know where that came from, it just came to me to say that. Might be feeling like it's going to explode, really. I don't know. We're not a neuroscientist. So,
No, it makes perfect sense. And for an episode that is about gray divorce, I think a very strong current and under theme here is awareness for everyone. I want those who are going through gray divorce, who have adult children, to hear the very powerful insights that you shared here, because they will save everyone a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty going forward. also those who are adult children to understand that their feelings are valid, that
Yeah.
they need to be able to express them. And, I think very importantly, one of the things you said that is if that dynamic is not happening, that there is help, that there are, that therapeutic intervention may be helpful, getting a therapist, a coach, someone who can help you have these conversations if you aren't able to do that, if your head feels like it's going to explode when you're trying to talk to your parents. So, so important. So, Home Will Never Be the Same. That is the book, but I know that you and so listeners, I will have a link in the show notes to the book, but you also have a wonderful handout for listeners. Can you tell them about the handout?
Yes, it's actually for the parents and for the adult children. The book was Home Will Never Be the Same, A Guide for Adult Children of Gray Divorce. Because I work with both the adults, the parents, and the adult children, as we've talked today, we're not minimizing, things that the parents need to know. So it's tips and information for both the adult children of gray divorce and the parents.
So important. We're going to have a link to the download for you all in the show notes. So you can go there. It will also be on the Divorce and Beyond Pod website. So you can go there to download it. But, I love that this episode about gray divorce, everyone is so very focused on the couple going through the divorce. And this is, yes, focused there, but also very much shining a light on the experience of those adult children.
Yeah.
And I cannot tell you, I was just out, looking, going to some open houses for real estate yesterday. And one of the realtors, we were talking, and somehow what I did for a living came up. And he started, his parents were going through a divorce. And he started telling me the story of how hard this was for him. And it was funny because this was yesterday, and I knew you and I would be
Yeah.
taping this episode today. And I just thought that was the universe saying, this is information people really need to hear. This is not an issue that is going away. Gray divorce continues to be a trending issue. The number of gray divorces continues to stay very high. And the chances are that there are adult children involved in the majority of those cases. So, Carol, thank you for your work, for your book. And I'm so appreciative of your coming back. 5 years later, we'll have to do it again before 5 more years pass. But thank you again so much for sharing your insights with my listeners.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Such a great conversation with Carol. So before we wrap up, let's take a moment for a few golden nuggets. First, gray divorce may include two spouses, but its impact reaches far beyond the couple. Even when children are adults, the end of a long-term marriage for their parents can reshape the emotional structure of the entire family. Second, adult children are often affected more deeply than parents expect. Many experience grief over the loss of the family unit they have known their entire lives, and they may struggle with loyalty conflicts or feeling caught between their parents. And finally, awareness makes a tremendous difference. When parents recognize the emotional impact of gray divorce on their adult children and approach the transition with empathy and thoughtful communication, families are far better positioned to preserve and even strengthen those relationships moving forward. Dr. Carol Hughes, thank you so much for joining me again on Divorce and Beyond and for sharing your insights on this important topic. Conversations like this help families better understand the ripple effects of gray divorce and how to navigate them with greater compassion and awareness. And to my listeners, thank you for spending this time with us today. I hope this conversation has given you helpful insight and perhaps even a new perspective on how families can move through these transitions with care. Because at the end of the day, while divorce may change the structure of a family, It doesn't have to end the relationships that matter most. If today's episode helped you see something more clearly, take a moment to reflect on one insight you can carry forward, one decision you can approach differently, one next step that feels more grounded. Divorce is not a failure. It is about facing reality and choosing a healthier path forward for yourself and your family. You can find show notes, trusted divorce resources, and expert guidance at divorceandbeyondpod.com. If this episode was helpful, follow the podcast and share it with someone who may need support right now. I'm Susan Guthrie. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next time with more clarity, insight, and support on Divorce and Beyond.